And now coming up, the talk from Tony, Tomislav, Dimitri, and Marcel on ideological and political aspects of free software and open source. The talk is called Hacking Ideologies Part 2, Open Source, a Capitalist Movement. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, this is part 2 of something we started at What the Hack a few years ago. It was at that time a spontaneous reaction to an introduction talk at the What the Hack event, where I was provoked by the use of language like terms like democracy and freedom of speech without actually qualifying what do we mean when we say those words, those terms. Especially at the time, and I still live in UK for past 11 years now, and coming from UK at that time during What the Hack, where the Iraqi war was in the media, pretty much in your face 24/7. Freedom of expression and freedom of speech and democracy meant something completely different living in UK. They meant justification for attacking Iraq. So unless you qualify how do we differ from what the establishment and the states mean by it, then we are simply using their propaganda for their own benefit. We're repeating them like parrots. In few words, I'll just say of the notion of ideology and why I'm doing this. The basis of ideology is the way I want to talk about it here, is the existence of a common language, of something that binds us. And probably the most important notion is fantasy, which arises spontaneously between the subject who speaks. So I speak and there is a common belief. Hi? Yeah. Okay. So is it still good enough like this? Because I can't hear myself now. Yeah. Okay. Is this better? Right. So, normally, I assume that you will understand what I'm talking about, and you do the same act. You assume that I understand vice versa, but that doesn't happen. What actually happens most of the time is a fantasy. We both imagine that we're being understood simply for the sake of, having a communication, having a language. So it's a leap of faith. Every communication is a leap of faith. And I think that the role of critique of ideology is to break that leap of faith. It's to actually unbind the binding spontaneous solidarity between the communicative agents. And that's what I'll try to just introduce with talking about the free software and open software and open source initiative. I wasn't really interested at the beginning into it. It was simply by reading, page by page of various accounts of the history, how it happened when the open source split, that I got quite surprised by the level of justification by the open source guys who said, we are just doing it for the sake of doing it. We don't have any ethical or ideological beliefs. We're just doing it because we need business involved. And that's pretty much the bottom line of the talk from my side. I'll talk another 10 minutes, and then we'll each talk for 10 minutes, and then hopefully we'll have some questions and a bit of clarifications or whatever needs to be said. So what surprised me most is how clear it was that when Eric Raymond, reading historic documents, now historic, 10 years is a long time, how clear it was that they wanted to exclude Richard Stallman from it and what were the reasons. And their claim was, we are not ethical, we don't have ethics per se, we just want to get some funds involved so we can move it to a different level. And it's quite shocking to me still today that it's commonly accepted that that's how it is. Open source is not ideological, open source has no claims which are ideological, while at the same time, the usual fruit of Free Software Foundation is the ethics, almost the religious, and the behavior of Richard Stallman, who reacts strongly when his ethics or beliefs are challenged. So I think what open source initiatives showed that between Free Software Foundation claims and between what happened till that time and the capitalist neoliberal economy, there was a gap that needs to be bridged by an institution. And that's what open source initiative did. I don't think it was possible to include free software as it was in the economy. So it is understandable why they did it. What prevents us to think the use of technology in society in ways which are other than profit-driven, clear-cut capitalist economy is thinking of it as non-ideology, thinking of it as, you know, just doing it. We're the pragmatists, it's fine. We don't have any claims. So I think there is a bit of work to be done there to remove that claim from its own, to remove its own truth foundation, so to say. What's more amazing is that when I talk to people who have science degrees, back where I work in London, people who even have science PhDs and spend their lifetimes in labs, hacking software, for them capitalism isn't ideological because it's not based on axioms, you know, because it hasn't got its own manifesto, so to say, while at the same time science is perfectly axiomatic and it has foundations which aren't there to be challenged unless you want to set up a completely new paradigm, a revolution in science. So it is perfectly acceptable in science, but we can't have axioms or ethics in anything else, because if we do so, then we're accused, like Free Software Foundation gets all the time, of earlier. I think the fantasy, the most important fantasy for me that we in West buy into, well, that we build unconsciously when we live here is something to do with the previous talk. I was only 10 minutes into it about spies because it's a fascinating subject, and I'll have to watch it all now when I saw 5 minutes of it, is the claim that the British Parliament wanted to remove the history of 700 years of history of English Parliament by being able to abolish each parliamentary act passed simply by a stroke of a minister. And presenter earlier said that that's terrible because we're losing history of democracy. Well, this is, I think, fundamental fantasy. I think that the liberal democratic concept of liberal democracy is a fantasy which serves, well, it serves to keep the society coherent to an extent. And I don't think we'll lose anything if ministers in UK can sign off the history. I think that's great. And I didn't know about the law, and I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased it's been there, and I hope that the Lords will change their mind on it. As to the word totalitarian used in a previous presentation, I have tried a couple of times. I just finished in London sociology at Goldsmiths, and I've tried to use the term sociology on a few occasions, but I was shot down in flames because there are piles and piles of books who claim that, you know, East Europe socialism, that was the totalitarian society, and we live in our enlightened society where we can discuss things and we are democratic and so on and so on. I think the situation is quite the opposite, and the presenter saying earlier that the fact that no one believes anymore the mainstream media in UK means that we're getting close to totalitarian society. I think that's not the problem. I think the problem is that we still consider our society to be democratic, and we still consider parliament as the means to progress for everyone. I think that's a real problem. So by having capitalism in our minds as a non-ideological, as the objective truth of our world today, by treating it as such, we're basically blocking any possible change, even discussing it. There are a couple of issues which are side effects of this when I did the research last year, and one is, in a more concrete terms, what can be done. I found that as soon as I finished my degree, all access to all online libraries which I had as a student was withdrawn actually a week before even my student card expired. And when I talked back to the staff, people at colleges there, the predominant answer was, well, you know, that's just how it is, you're not a student anymore, sod off. But the argument that they agreed with but couldn't swallow and act on was that to a vast extent in Europe, education has been paid for by the state. So the books that academics produce are paid by everyone, pretty much by citizens, by taxpayers. Yet, as soon as they're produced, they get encapsulated in private publishers who pretty much don't do anything these days because you can just run off your send them your PDF, and it's pretty much with few small corrections ready for print, including even editorial these days being done on the side of people who write books. So we as a society produce, and the private capital encloses it in, you know, a normal, probably most of you know this, but normal price of an article goes to 15, 20 pounds or 15, $20, and it's a 5 or 10 page article. So, so yeah, they all agree with me. I still haven't had a single person which disagreed with me who works in academia in UK on the principle that everything that's published in academia should be, you know, free to share and should be under one of the licenses which allow us to share it. Yet none of them are ready to act for it because the system forces them to act in a certain manner to get their jobs and to get their careers on the line. So I don't think we are so blind at the ideology. I think it's very convenient to see it the way we see it. So that's one of the issues where next few years I'll try to do some work, and one of the use cases that's being suggested to me at my current place of study, which is London School of Economics, postgraduate in sociology as well, was, well, we could do simply Firefox straight to torrents, so that when students who, I mean, in thousands download from various completely closed networks various texts and complete books these days, when they do so, that without their knowledge it actually gets created as a torrent and it gets onto networks so that people can see it outside. That would be a short hack how to expose, at least, expose the closed networks to the wider audience. And the second thing, before I finish, second thing is drugs, as drugs, AIDS and malaria. I didn't do much research into this, but the little bit that I did as well shocked me when I found out that, well, shocked me, it didn't shock me, but I was a bit surprised how much, given how much ideological PR goes into private companies saying, oh, we invest so much research into it, we invest so much money, we have to recoup the cost. That's, in case of UK, that's lie, because it is paid by the taxpayers again. It's the government that has contracts which are in billions, literally, of pounds to fund the research. So it is again taxpayers' money which then gets encapsulated for 20 years. And the clear-cut result of that is, and there is no doubt to this when you talk to people from Africa who are trying to push this agenda further, is that millions of people a year, every year, are dying because they don't have access to AIDS and malaria drugs. And they're not asking for drugs to be shipped there. They're asking for a recipe. They want to make them. So one of the ideas I had was, why don't we try to push this forward as well, you know, having free drugs as a concept. Why not? It's paid by us anyway, so there is no private capital, or private capital is a small part of what gets invested into producing those drugs. And also the question that I want to raise is, what is the difference between the Holocaust and the current capitalist regime, which doesn't kill directly millions in Africa and Asia, but it does clearly prevents them from being cured by not allowing drugs to be produced for free, by not, you know, basically by using patent as economic means of protection. What's the difference between millions being killed within few years or millions being killed each year? I think the difference is that we live in a far worse system than we think we are, and I think that the terror scare, if there is a terror in the world, it comes from us, and we are the terror engine that drives world to extremes. And that second thing, I'll finish with, basically I think we should, and this is just kind of anarchist activist friends, well, it's easy to get an agreement from them about piracy, that we should do it and we should just disregard the law. What is the law but the fiction that gets created? I mean, there is a term called legal fiction. It's not there for nothing. It's because when it started there was no law to start with. So I think I fully agree with Pirate Bay when they announced that they will not discuss those issues anymore. I think we should just discuss how to break those laws and how to publish what can be published in a digital form, from closed networks to open networks. And anyone who's got any ideas afterwards to talk about how can we hack something in Firefox so it's easy when you download a text or a file of certain type, so it's easy to publish it in torrent. If there's something, if it exists and I'm not aware of it, I'll be really glad if someone points me towards it. And that's all for me. And next is Marcel.
Thanks. Okay, so this sounds quite serious. So